and welcome to the Legal Edition. I'm your host, Attorney Mary Kay-Loyan. Today's guest is Dr. Terry Mollner, a founder of the Calvert Social Investment Funds and the Calvert Foundation. He is a pioneer of the first socially responsible mutual funds, and he is the founder and chair of the Trusteeship Institute and also of Stakeholder Capital. He is also a board member of Ben & Jerry's and author and lecturer. Welcome to have you here today again.
Thank you very much,
for part two.
Sure.
Now, last time we talked about common good investing. Now we want to talk a little bit more about common good capitalism. Common good investing, is it inevitable?
Common good investing?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's just like human beings developing our elaborate languages was inevitable. Mm-hmm. Human beings discovering the importance of individual freedom was inevitable. Mm-hmm. If someone had, before we had ended up creating democracies, if somebody had figured out that we would get there, they would have said it was inevitable because it's a part of the maturation of the human species.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that maturation, actually. But common good investing, it enhances individual freedom. It does not qualify it.
That's right.
Can you explain that a little bit?
If I'm investing in a company that is giving priority to the common good of all, mm-hmm. First of all, I sleep better at night because I know I'm a part of making the world a better place rather than a part of making it a worse place.
Right.
In very simple terms. The second thing is that company in itself is cooperating with other companies and with governments to also move the species forward in our maturation as a species because mm-hmm. it's cooperating with everyone else. So that makes me feel good that I'm a part of that by mm-hmm. investing in that company. Mm-hmm. Common good investing is something that meets your inner desire to be a good human being mm-hmm. and to feel good about yourself. And it meets your outer desire to be a participant mm-hmm. in making the world a better place. And
we hear that all the time, you know, people wanting to give back to society.
Right.
And this is a means to actually do that, accomplish that.
That's right.
Now, we talked a little bit about maturity last time, but we didn't really get into it. Can we discuss, you said there are 7 layers of maturity.
Right.
Could you just please discuss that?
I think this is very, very important because there needs to be a rationale, an understanding of why we would make the maturation into common good investing and common mm-hmm. good corporations and common good capitalism. Why will it happen? Why is it inevitable?
Right.
It's inevitable because of the nature of the human being. You know, people have come up with stages of maturity from Buddha on down, mm-hmm. And I've come up with the ones I discovered on my own, frankly, and then I discovered that Ken Wilber, who is a modern author, has done a survey of all the different stages of maturity models, and he's come up with his, and mine reflects one section of his. But the stages of maturity are these. I'll just name them first. There's
Sure.
baby, toddler, child, teenager, adult, elder, and mature elder. So 7 stages of maturity. When a baby comes into the world, the baby doesn't have the ability of language or of self-consciousness. So the baby's not able to identify with the United States and not with other countries. It doesn't have the ability to separate things into separate parts. So the baby's experience is, I'm everything. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the ability to break it down and to identify with some parts of it or not. If you laugh with the baby laughs. If you cry, the baby cries. So the baby's in an unconscious state of oneness with all things, all right? The first stage of consciousness happens right quickly after coming out of the womb when the baby realizes mommy, no mommy, warmth, no warmth, milk, no milk. So it begins to recognize differences. That's the first stage of the recognition of self-conscious skill. The next stage is the child stage, and that's when, by the year 2 years old, the child's learned a language, or is beginning to learn a language. So when the child learns a language, the child takes on the assumption that I am my body, I'm not the air, I'm not you, I'm not the table. So if mom says, in order to have the candy on the table, you got to first kiss Uncle Charlie, and Uncle Charlie stinks of cigar smoke, and so my feelings, you know, from my toddler level, doesn't want to kiss Uncle Charlie. But my priority is now my child level, I want to get the candy. So I run over and quickly kiss Uncle Charlie and go get the candy, all right?
Right.
So the highest priority for the child is what the child wants, because it sees itself as over here and the candy's over there. So it stuffs its feelings, which was the highest priority when it was at the toddler stage, happy, not happy. The next stage is the teenage stage. That's when the person realizes, oh, I can make up the multiple choice questions rather than just live inside the ones that mom and dad give me. So if mom says, do you want chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry ice cream, instead of saying chocolate, I'll say, well, I don't want to talk about ice cream right now. I want to talk about getting a car. So you realize you could make up the multiple choice questions and you realize free choice. So the teenage stage is when you give priority to free choice. So if you're mad at mom and dad and you really would like some home cooking and you really like to be able to be in your bedroom, but you're mad at mom and dad, you stay at the mall. Because your individual freedom is more important than your wants or your feelings.
It's that rebellious stage.
That's that rebellious stage.
Okay.
The next stage is the adult stage. Now, the adult stage is when you figure out that the most important free choice is my belief system. If I believe science is the way, well, then I'll say, what would Albert Einstein do? If I think capitalism is the way, what would Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs do? If I think, Christianity is the way, what would Jesus do? So whatever you choose as your fundamental belief, you give all your power to it. And you now obey it. And you do what it says you should do. Most people don't realize that they've pretty much given up a lot of their individual freedom when they've chosen their fundamental belief, because they're now obey this belief that they've chosen.
So they have a higher master.
They have a higher master. But instead of the master being outside them like mom and dad, the master's now inside them. But they've created the master.
Right.
The next stage of maturity is what I call the elder layer. And that's when you figure out the accurate fundamental assumption about reality. What is the accurate fundamental assumption about reality? Well, language allows you to reflect anything in language. So we can reflect it in language. And the words that I find best to reflect the fundamental truth about reality is the universe is an indivisible whole. Now, what's really significant about this is that science emerged as a reaction to all those mythological things created by especially the religions and the philosophers and everybody in the Middle Ages, and said, no, we're going to go directly to our direct experience to find out what the truth is. We're going to have data, all right? So science is not very comfortable with illusions. Illusions not good, reality good, okay? Well, now, and I brought this article.
Yes, please.
Because I wanted to be able to point this out.
Please do.
What science is now discovering is that time and space are not real. And let me just quote, this is an article from Quantum Magazine, which is a science journal, a very prestigious science journal. And the first sentence of this article, A Jewel at the Heart of Quantum Physics, by Natalie Wolkover, the first sentence is this: physicists have discovered a jewel-like geometric object that dramatically simplifies calculations of particle interactions and challenges, and challenges the notion that space and time are fundamental components of reality. And then it goes on to give a whole analysis of the study. And I've seen other studies of this. Now, the reason this is important is because the first stage of the skill, there's three dimensions to the skill of self-consciousness. The recognition of differences, which happens as soon as you come out of the womb, the understanding of time and space, which allows us to create a language and to become self-conscious, and the recognition of the oneness of nature. So these are the three fundamental constructs of self-consciousness. We're all familiar with the first two.
Yes.
The problem we're having is we're thinking that time and space is still real. Time and space is not real. It's a mutually agreed upon illusion which allows us to create elaborate languages. There's 6,000 languages on Earth that in turn allow us to become self-conscious, to know what we're doing while we're doing it, to think about the past, to think about the future, and to execute a plan for the future in the present. That's the skill of self-consciousness. So at the sixth stage of maturity is when you figure out, oh my gosh, I've been giving my power away to a belief. It doesn't make any difference what the belief was. I've been giving my power away to a second thing. I don't believe there is a second thing. I think the universe is one indivisible whole. So then you begin to think about a whole other set of things. The seventh stage of maturity, the last stage of maturity, is when you realize, well, what's going to be my priority if I'm not going to give my priority to a belief, to a second thing? How do I escape assuming that time and space is real, that separate parts are real? And then you realize what Buddha realized a long time ago, and lots of other people have realized, Lao Tzu and Jesus and Muhammad, and they all basically realized it. The universe is an indivisible whole. Therefore, I must give priority to the experience of the oneness of nature. The experience that you and I are having right now, where's the beginning of this experience? It's a continuum. It keeps on going. There is no beginning to this experience. There is no end to this experience. There's no edge to this experience. Right now, you and I are focused on each other, but we're open to experiencing the entire universe because there's no boundary that's stopping us from experiencing the whole universe.
Right. So this layer of maturity, these 7 layers of maturity, these go into this whole common good investing model.
That's right. So let me work my way back to that.
Yes.
So then at the 7th stage of maturity, you say, okay, I have to give priority to the experience of the oneness of nature. But this means I got to make some changes. I got to have the accurate fundamental belief, which is the universe is an indivisible whole. I don't know if you've noticed, the scientists have not found the beginning of the universe, they have not found the end of it, and they haven't found the edge.
I don't think they will.
Well, they can't, because there isn't any. But so that's the content. I have to have the belief accurate. I have to also change my self-definition. Whoa, if the universe is an indivisible whole, then I'm first the whole universe that doesn't die, and only secondly this part of it that does die. Well, that's a whole different construct for how I define self. So now my self-interest becomes what we've called moral behavior. My self-interest as the universe is to give priority to the common good of us all as a free choice. Then the third thing that has to happen is that I have to change the process of my thinking. Because the pattern of my thinking since I'm 2 years old and learned the language has been that that time and space is real. If this is the construct of time and space, over here, 2 spots, it takes me time to go between the 2 of them. What is the pattern of thinking that reflects the oneness of nature? Priorities. There's no factors of time and space in priorities. So my priority can be I am the universe. My second priority is I'm this body, which is the soul part of the universe, over which I have complete control from the inside. And so now I can do both of those 100% at the same time. Just like my hand is a hand, and it's a part of my body. It's 100% the hand, and it's 100% my body, but it gives priority to go to the whole body because it defines itself as the body first and the hand second.
Right.
So now I define myself as the universe first and this body second. And so this moves me into 2 things. The pattern of my thinking must give priority to priorities in my pattern, and second priority to this or that, because I still want to have language present, and I still want to be self-conscious. But I now give priority to priority. So I now have 2 patterns of thinking, and I give priority to the priority pattern.
Okay, so but I think for the viewers, if you could tie this into the common good investing.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to complete that because those who are really understanding this will probably love that I did complete that. The next stage of maturity for investing, for business, is when we freely choose to give priority to the common good. That's been moral behavior throughout history, and that is what you do when you're operating at the 6th and 7th stages of maturity. You now understand that the 3rd dimension of self-consciousness is the recognition of the oneness of nature. You now understand that time and space is a mutually agreed upon illusion, which allows us to create language and become self-conscious, but it does not define reality. Oneness defines reality, and so now you give priority to the common good as your self-interest, not as a do-gooder thing or as an altruistic thing or as some unnature thing or something you're going to force yourself to good because somebody told you you should.
So what you're saying is you put the common good ahead of the profits, ahead of everything else is the common good, and that's where these companies will actually be doing much better by putting the emphasis on the common good.
Well, now, let me just say something about that. What happened with our socially responsible businesses? Back in the 1960s and 70s, we began to create all these socially responsible businesses. Stony Field Farms, The Body Shop, Honest Tea, Ben & Jerry's. We could go on. There's lots of them. Almost every one of them has been bought by a multinational now. What was going on there? What was stunning to Unilever when they bought Ben & Jerry's was how small our marketing budget was. We were popular because people loved who we were and what we stood for and what we did. Wall Street Journal every year did an evaluation of the most loved companies. Ben & Jerry's was always at the top.
Yes.
The socially responsible movement, business movement, was a movement where we went to the customer and say, hey, we're doing this in a better way for the common good of us all. And people fell in love with us and they supported us for that reason. The same thing's going to happen with common good investing and business and corporations and capitalism. People will freely choose to gravitate towards supporting it because it just makes them feel better.
Well, also, too, weren't you a role model, too? I mean, in this common good investing scheme with Ben & Jerry's. I mean, here they have a role model. They have a premium product, and they do good by the employees and by the environment with their packaging and everything else. So they've pretty much rolled that into a
We have.
snowballed that, actually.
Well, and the other thing that the viewers might like to know is we're the only socially responsible company that got bought by a multinational that arranged a contract.
Yes, please discuss that contract a
So
little
we have
bit.
a contract with Unilever that allows the board of directors to stay in existence in perpetuity, which means forever, and to be self-perpetuating. In other words, we choose the next people who replace us when we move on. And we have a contract with Unilever that says the board of directors has primary responsibility for the social mission of Ben & Jerry's. And we have a measuring stick that measures whether or not they're doing that. In other words, the main measuring stick is that the expenditures on the social mission activities of the company must not be lower than the growth in the sales. In other words, from the time that we were bought, it must stay the same percentage.
I see.
So we have we could sue Unilever if they break that contract. So we have a legal contract with Unilever to do this. Now, Unilever is in total cahoots in supporting us in doing this. In fact, they're coming to us and saying, we want to learn from you because you know, you're doing some things that is the future, and so we want to learn from you.
So it's a good model.
It's a good model. So it's worked well.
Okay, so getting back to the layers of maturity, where do you see the U.S. in all this on the corporate and national level? Where do you see the United States?
Well, it's kind of hard to make a generalization.
Okay.
But let's see. The teenage stage is when you're giving priority to your individual freedom. I would say Americans are pretty drunk on individual freedom, wouldn't you? Individual freedom is the founding of our country, and it's the thing we hold most dear. If you threaten the individual freedom of an American, they react really quickly. So there's no question that that's a priority of Americans. But then there's also this adult layer where we live according to our beliefs. Well, definitely a large percentage of the people in the United States definitely live according to very specific beliefs, whether it's Christianity, Islam, capitalism, science, whatever it is. Are there many people who understand the oneness of nature and understand that time and space is as valuable as reality, but is an illusion? Not a lot of people, I think, understand that in the United States today. But that is growing in the number of people who understand that. That is very much growing. Science is now supporting it, and science is the voice for God in our culture today. So I think this is definitely emergent. So if I was to be courageous, I would say the United States is the adult stage of maturity, that we are living according to our beliefs as much as possible. That's our priority, and we try to do that. Do we succeed at it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but I think it is our intention.
But the whole goal is to reach that mature level, that elder level of maturity, and that's when we have really arrived at this most socially responsible point. Is that correct?
Well, when you've reached the seventh layer, where
Yes.
you understand the importance of giving priority to the experience of the oneness of nature, and then you change the pattern of your thinking,
I
etc.
see.
But here's the thing that's important. The whole system of nation states, where'd that come from? Shouldn't all the people on the planet be giving priority to the good of all the people on the planet?
Unfortunately, that's not happening right
So
now.
the fact that we still give priority to our nation vis-a-vis other nations reveals that our main pattern is still at the adult layer. We're still thinking in terms of separate parts. You would have a hard time getting elected to Congress if you stood up and said a lot of the things I've said on your show today, okay? Because the masses of people are not, they're operating at the adult layer or one of the layers lower than the adult layer.
And sometimes I think the teenage layer.
Yes, well, some people are operating at the child level. What they want is most important to them, and they don't give a darn about anything else. You know, but you know what? The neat thing about this is, when you're operating, you know, I figured out these stages of maturity on my own. I became aware of the stages of maturity up to the teenage stage, and then through studying of my own experiences is the way I figured out what the next stages were. I was then stunned to discover that Buddha had figured out pretty much the same stages, and that, you know, Ken Wilber had done an analysis and discovered that all the most bright thinking people have pretty much come up with the same stages too. What I find wonderful is that once you're at one of the stages of maturity and you become conscious that you're at a stage of maturity, we don't even have the construct in the American society of talking about stages of maturity. We don't have the sense of elders who are responsible for eldering us up. Parenting is not supposed to be eldering us up to the highest stages of maturity. We kind of dump our kids off at the teenage stage and say, we hope you do well.
Some traditional societies do that.
That's right.
But not American society.
That's right.
And I think that could be contributing to some of the problems that we have seen.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. We became so drunk on individual freedom we jettisoned everything else. But you know what? Here's the nature of the transition to the next stage of maturity. First, you become drunk on it. Because when things aren't working right, you say, well, the thing that got me happy last time was to do this, so I do it even more. And you're still not happy. Only then, when you've exercised that many, many times, do you say, well, let's see, what would be something else I could do to become more happy? Only then do you try on something that's quite the opposite of what worked last time. Because each stage of maturity is kind of an integration of another opposite into the fold. And so then when you try it on and you discover, here's what's beautiful about that. Once you discover the next stage of maturity, in other words, once a teenager discovers the importance of having a fundamental worldview and living according to it so there's consistency and meaning in his or her life, they glom onto it. It then becomes most important.
So if we could turn that into a way that companies can achieve that stage of, this is what's important, we need to move to the next layer so that we can give back to the society, which is our employees, our environment. I see a lot of movement in that direction. Let's get the environment on the road to recovery, whether it be climate change or whatever. And companies can have a lot of input in that. One of the questions I wanted to mention to you, there's a lot of talk today about fracking and the environment and companies being involved in that, energy companies. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great example of something that we have to think through. I saw in the New York Times a year and a half ago an article that said it would only cost the fracking companies 7% more in their costs to make sure that they didn't damage the drinking water. Duh. Why don't we all get together and do it? Because now we expect the government to force them to do it, or if they don't have to do it, then that's a cost that they can eliminate that makes more profit. So we want the government to come in as a paternal organization to do that? Hey, how about all you guys who are fracking get together and reach an agreement among yourselves to do what's good and protect your business from this assault that you're having? Now, that may not be true, what I've just said. It may be that it's just not that easy to protect the groundwater. The New York Times article said that it was. But this is the kind of thing where what we really want is for the companies themselves to say, hey, all of us who are doing fracking, let's all get together. Let's reach an agreement among ourselves. Let's not wait for the government to do this in a way. And then we'll even tell the government, okay, you make it into a law, but we've created it.
Now that you've mentioned that, let's get into the issue of movements. Because there's the issues of whether government has the power, Congress has the power, or the people have the power. Would you like to elaborate on that?
This is one of my stunning recent discoveries. I was really shocked when I realized when I figured this out. Most of us assume that the politicians have the most power. Okay, so we get all very caught up in electing our politicians. I discovered the politicians have the least amount of power.
And why is that?
The group that has the strongest power, and this is in terms of change, not in terms of whether or not your tax bill goes up or down.
Right.
In terms of changing the way we think and then changing the society, the group that has the most power are movements. Because the purpose of a movement is to change the way we all think. If we change the way somebody thinks, that changes their consumer behavior. So the second most powerful group is the consumer, because what the consumer buys determines what the corporations do. Now the corporations is the third most powerful group, and they try to influence what consumers buy very, very much. But in the end, they have to please the consumer or they go out of business.
Right.
So the third most powerful group is the corporations. The fourth and least powerful group in terms of bringing about change is the politicians. They can only get in front of the parades that are already going down Main Street. They can't create the parades very easily. They try sometimes, but they usually don't succeed. But what's most important is a movement like the Civil Rights Movement helped us change the way we all think about African Americans. The women's movement helped us change the way we think about women in terms of equal rights with men. The environmental movement, the gay marriage movement. Each of these movements is about changing the way we think. Once you change the way people think, that changes all of their behavior. And so now they're going to treat women differently, they're going to treat blacks differently, they're going to care about the environment more, and that's going to be natural and effortless because they've changed the way they think. The consumer behavior then changes. I mean, it's stunning how many of the corporations now are trying to get on the environmental bandwagon because they simply don't want to be behind the bus.
That's right.
So they have to do it. And so that's the way you change the corporations, is by the movements changing the consumer, which changes the corporations. The politicians are often who has the most money to determine what the politicians do? It's the corporations today. Right. And so the politicians are very beholden to the corporations and have a hard time moving against them. When the corporations are on board, then the politicians can start to pass legislation. So legislation tends to come Johnny-come-lately usually. What you want to do is build movements, because those are the most powerful groups for change.
Yeah, we just saw recently with the movement that was sweeping across this country, where we had the stand-ins and the sit-ins in New York and Boston. And
you mean the Occupy Wall Street?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street ended up hanging its shingle on 99% versus the 1%. That resonated with people all over the planet. I don't know, did you look at the map? People did spontaneous demonstrations and what they call those tent cities all over the planet. On every nation on the planet they did it. Because people resonated with that fundamental idea that the 99% are being held back by the 1%. But they embraced anarchism. And they embraced a whole lot of things which were moving in the right direction in terms of consensus, decision-making, all that kind of thing. But because, in my judgment, they didn't understand this whole thing about the stages of maturity. Right. I should say we, because I was a part of it as well. Ben and Jerry's, we were down scooping ice cream for everybody down in New York. Because they still think time and space is real. The problem with the political left is that because we still think time and space is real, we think there's good guys and bad guys. There's not good guys and bad guys. The thing that Mahatma Gandhi figured out was really quite brilliant. What Mahatma Gandhi figured out was everybody's primary intention is good, and about that they don't have a choice. Why? Because they're part of the one indivisible universe. Their beliefs could be all over the map.
And we see that every day.
That's right. And especially at their lower levels of maturity, their beliefs can be really very, very deranged. Their secondary intentions and their behavior will reflect those beliefs. But what Gandhi figured out was, Gandhi said, when you look at another person in the eyes, see them as their primary good intention, because that's who they really primarily are, and that's how they see themselves. And that's what nonviolence is. Nonviolence is meeting eye to eye within that place of we're all in this together for the common good, which is what everybody really does resonate with at the very bottom level. And then as a secondary activity, bring anything else to the table. A lot of people don't understand that Mahatma Gandhi created a word for what he called this. He called the word satyagraha in Hindi, and he translated the word as the natural force of truth. Translating that into nonviolence was a very big mistake, because nonviolence has an opposite, violence. The natural force of truth does not have an opposite.
So with that in mind, we need to wrap up today, Terry, but this has been quite an enlightening experience. So you see our companies moving towards that progression, and
it's inevitable. It's simply a matter of how soon. And you were saying the company's changing. Frankly, the company's changing is secondary. Individual people have to change, because those are the people that
we have to change first.
That's right.
I want to thank our guest, Dr. Terry Mollner of the Calvert Social Investment Funds and the Trusteeship Institute, for sharing his visions for growing our economy and contributing to a better global society. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. As always, if you have any questions for either myself or our guests, please visit our show website at www.thelegaledition.com to contact us with your question or comment. And please remember, this information is for general information and educational purposes only. It's not to be relied upon as legal or business advice, and please seek the guidance of a qualified professional of your choosing. Again, we thank you for tuning in. This concludes our two-part series with Dr. Mollner. Thank you for joining us, and tune in next time on The Legal Edition.